Hello everyone. So in this video, it will be a quick first impression and a quick review of the Zhiyun's newest offering, which is the Weebill S. And this is a compact gimbal that can support professional level mirrorless, full frame mirrorless cameras that also does video production. And what you are seeing here is my typical setup. So I have the Sony A7 III camera mounted with a G Master F2.8 24 to 70 millimeter lens. And so the reason I got this gimbal is because it's advertised to be able to work with this kind of heavy mirrorless setups. And apparently, as you can see, I have everything already unboxed and set up. I literally just bought it yesterday, and it's Amazon one-day delivery, so I got it today. I spent a little bit of the time playing around with the gimbal, playing around with the balancing and the adjustment and the settings of the gimbal. So at this point, I can give you guys maybe just a quick overview of what you're gonna expect when you spend $439 buying a compact gimbal like this. Okay, so obviously it's out of the box with a Ninja Admins 5 connected. That's my external recorder, and I have a little magic arm. Also, this is not part of the gimbal package. Okay, this is something extra that I bought. I'll put a link down below on where to get those. So this is a newer I think 7-inch magic arm, which works great with external monitors because it's easy to adjust and locks on to the position very well. Okay, Adams 5 external recorder. So this is the only thing extra that didn't come with a gimbal. The gimbal also comes with a little kind of lens support that I didn't use with this particular setup, and I'll tell you why in a little bit, because I'm gonna do this review in a reverse order, which is take off the camera and then lock the gimbal into its original form, so you guys can see the whole process of how the gimbal is taken down from a reverse point of a perspective. I don't think anyone else has done that before, but I'm gonna show you guys. Comes in this little nice, fairly compact, small box. It's white. It's very Apple-like design. In the box is a little black case. Unfortunately, that case does not have a latch or a lock, so you really can't use this case to store the gimbal for storage and for travel. That's the reason I already put everything back in here, because it's not necessary. And compare this gimbal's box with my DJI Ronin S box. As you can see, the S box is actually already larger than the actual gimbal's box. And now this gives you an idea of the size difference between the two gimbals. So my original gimbal, the Ronin S, is right over here. And this is my everyday setup for video production. If the client requires me to use a gimbal on the set, I'm going to be bringing the Ronin S. And other than that, the camera I'm using to record is actually a Zhiyun Crane M2 that I reviewed last week. I liked it so much. Now I just use that little gimbal mounted on a tripod for some quick videos like this. Okay, and let me show you some basic functions first. First, I'm going to turn on the gimbal. Okay, there's a button on the side that you can turn on. By pressing it for 2 seconds, it turns on the gimbal, and then it goes into the default mode that you set. The gimbal have a couple of buttons. On the left side, there's actually a rocker switch. The switch switches between the pan follow mode and the lock mode. So basically the pan follow mode, this is the pan follow by the way, the gimbal locks on to the tilt axis, but as soon as you turn the gimbal, it turns. So that's pan follow. So one axis is locked and the panning action is not locked. It follows your hand movement. The next function on the rocker switch is a lock. So in the lock mode, gimbal stays focused on one area. It doesn't matter where you look, where you move, it just locks onto this one point. Okay, so that's a lock. So I believe those are the two most commonly used features. That's why Zhiyun used a rocker switch for those two modes. And another function is over here, which is a button. It's FN. So the function button, if you press it and hold it, it goes into the go mode. So the go mode is like if you want to record some quick actions and you yourself also moving around, you can just use the go mode, press it quickly, and it goes into the go mode. I'll show you guys how quickly it turns. Okay, so press it, and as you can see, it like follows rapidly of your hand movement, and it does a nice job smoothing out, you know, the movements following your quickly moving subjects. So that's a go mode, and that's all the buttons on the left side of the gimbal. On the right side, there's no buttons. There's only a USB port. So interestingly, you cannot use this port to charge the gimbal. To charge the gimbal, you have to physically take the battery out, which is at the bottom, and use the dedicated charger that they have included, which is right over here. It's a nice little portable charger with a USB cable, which they also included. And you need to use this cable and find a suitable charger. So hopefully you have your phone charger, which should be able to charge this, this battery fairly quickly. But you cannot charge the battery in the gimbal. At least that's what I found out, because I tried to plug in a USB cable in here and it doesn't really charge the battery, okay? I could be wrong, so if you think the Weebill S actually charges, when you put the USB cable in, do let me know in the comments section down below, because unfortunately that's one factor I found out after I bought the gimbal, okay? So again, no buttons on this side. On the back facing you, there are a couple interesting buttons, okay? So over here on the bottom is actually a button that can rotate, and it's also a four-way joystick. So you can press it upside, downside, left and right, and you can rotate it. And in the center is a camera release button. So this is actually a two-press button, which is pretty cool. So you half press on some of the supported cameras that you connect, you half press, it would do autofocus, which is pretty cool. And you press all the way in, it takes a picture, or it does the recording, which is the button right over here. So the recording button does the recording, okay? Over here on the right side of the recording button is the POV button. So if you press that button, the gimbal goes to POV mode. The POV mode is like a go mode, except it doesn't, oh, I think I pressed the wrong button. Let's see. So the POV mode also follows your movement. It's like point of view mode. It just doesn't move as fast as a go mode. So I'm gonna press the function button and go into the go mode, and you guys can see the movement difference. Okay, so go mode, you can see how fast the gimbal moves. And I release it, it goes back actually to the lock mode. Interesting. So it goes back, if you press the function button and you release the function button, it always goes to whatever you set over here on the rocker switch. So if you have it in pan follow, you press this to go to go, and you release it, it goes to pan follow. It doesn't go to POV mode. So that's something to take into consideration if you're doing mode switching. So that is the POV button, and on top of those buttons is your joystick. So this is more like a joypad instead of a joystick. It does the job perfectly fine, and it doesn't really protruding out like the Ronin S, which is literally a joystick stick. So so that's the difference between the Zhiyun and DJI. DJI likes to use the stick, and Zhiyun likes to use the pad. Okay. And that in the lock mode, you can control the location of the camera. And in the pan follow mode, you can only control the upside and downside, and the left and right is controlled by your hand movement. Okay, so that's what the joystick does. This little rotating 4-way joystick, this one, again, on the compatible camera, which this gimbal highly favors anything besides Sony. So if you have a Canon, you have a Nikon, you have a Panasonic, those cameras with proper adapters and cables, you'll be able to use a lot of features, you know, on this little 4-way joystick, the 4-way rotating joystick. And unfortunately for Sony, my features are very limited, so I'm not even gonna try connecting a cable on my Sony to do any of the other, you know, functions. Basically, I use this as a very portable, compact gimbal. That's the purpose of getting this smaller gimbal. If I need all the functions or more controls, I'll be using my Ronin S for the job, okay? So the huge advantage of the Weebill S, and the reason I bought it is actually it's very compact. It's almost 2 pounds lighter than my Ronin S, and it supports the exact same setup that I use on my Ronin S. And this is actually my largest setup, okay? Which is a Sony G Master 24-70mm lens. So yeah, another reason I want to do this kind of a reverse order teardown of the setup is because, again, this is the heaviest setup that this camera can support. This gimbal can support, at least on the Sony side, okay? Anything heavier than this, you're not gonna be able to balance it properly, or you might have to use some weird counterbalance to add some weight on the back of the camera. Otherwise, the camera just falls down to the front. And so that's enough of the feature set of the gimbal. Also, there's a little focusing wheel. Again, it doesn't really work with Sony focus control, so I'm not gonna be talking about this in this review. And for any other camera, it's gonna be able to control the focus follow, which is pretty nice, especially if you have Panasonic. I know a lot of people and a lot of content creators use the GH5, and this focusing control is gonna work fantastically with GH5. The 4-way joystick with rotating wheel also works great with all kinds of exposure features on your camera, so which is pretty amazing actually. When you connect the cable to the gimbal, it also charges your camera at the same time using the battery source in here, okay? Unfortunately, it doesn't charge itself by plugging a cable in, but it does charge your camera when you have the cable connected. That's a nice thing about this gimbal. And another reason you might want to consider this gimbal for traveling purpose. If you're shooting on location, if you're shooting locally and you have the luxury of getting a bigger gimbal, by all means, use a bigger gimbal, okay? So first thing first, I'm actually gonna just remove my external monitor. And also because of the compactness of this little gimbal, the external monitor kind of sits at an awkward position. Like if I'm putting it over here, it's kind of hard and sometimes it hits the ground. If I put it closer on the top, it actually hits the gimbal when it actually camera moves over here to the other side. So the monitor can only be mounted over here. On the Ronin S, as you can see, there's a lot more space for me to play around because there's a lot more space down here. And the focusing wheel can be mounted on 2 sides on the Ronin S, but unfortunately on the Zhiyun is actually fixed to the left side of the gimbal. So I'm gonna turn the gimbal off, which is just by simply pressing a couple seconds on the power button, and the gimbal turns off. And now, as you can see, I already balanced the camera, so I'm gonna take off the camera. Actually, when you balance the camera, it's really nice because you can actually, see, I just lost the balance, but I can quickly just rebalance it by doing the slider and lock it. So obviously the balancing part is actually super quick and super easy. It's way easier than the Ronin S, okay? Because of the advantage of locking all the axes during the balance process. It's really, really fast and really simple. Another nice thing about this gimbal is the quick release plate. So once you have the camera just properly set up, and all you have to do, let's see, let me release it really quick. There's a little knob over here where you can just kind of release over here, and then you can press on the other side and show you guys. You can really nicely release just this one plate of the camera. I believe this is a Manfrotto compatible plate, I believe, because the bottom plate is actually Arca Swiss compatible plate. So it's nice that it actually integrated both plates, and I know a lot of people use Manfrotto tripods, like I use my Manfrotto as well. Unfortunately, it's a different plate, but it's really nice they integrated both plates and integrated this quick release design, which is really, really nice and thoughtful, okay? As you can see on the side, I actually have the camera's riser plate mounted. So the reason I have to mount the riser plate is because this lens is very big. If I don't use the riser plate, this plate, the Manfrotto plate, is actually hitting the focusing ring. So I have to use the riser plate. Interesting thing, again, this is the heaviest lens this gimbal supports, okay? So I'm gonna take it apart. So the slight downside is the camera is still mounted on the plate with 3 screws, which is exactly same as the setup on my DJI Ronin S. So if you actually need to take the camera off the plates, it's 3 screws, and you need to have preferably a screwdriver because that makes this assembly so much faster, okay? So screwdriver is necessary, take notes. Bring a small one, it's gonna be really, really helpful if you need to take the camera off, okay? And obviously, as you can see, it's not quick release, so it's not a very slow, it's not a very quick process. And now those are the 2 quick release plates that they actually incorporated in here. Quite interestingly, very similar to the Ronin S plates, okay? All right, so I just did a little clean up on the surface, and now we can actually concentrate on the reverse order of unboxing the gimbal, okay? So right now, as you can see, with the camera removed and all the axes still unlocked, it's dangling around just like my Ronin S, which have no way of locking anything, okay? But fear no more, because I'm gonna show you something that's really cool on the Weebill S, which is, here, let me just do it properly. So without the camera, it's all screwed up, and I'm gonna show you something really amazing. So 1 axis locked, 2 axis locked, and the last one is locked. Check it out. It's beautifully locked in the ready to mount location, and this is gonna help you balance the gimbal so much faster, okay? It's just a no-brainer that every gimbal from now on should have this really nice feature, and not all the gimbal have this nice feature, but I think it's a new trend that the axis needs to be locked because it just makes things so much easier. With that said, this is the locked position for balancing. So basically, you can balance your camera first by put the camera over here, unlock this, and start balancing around, because all there is for the first balancing is a couple of really nice levers, as you can see. So those levers helps you balance the camera on the horizontal axis. And once you have this balanced, just lock the lever really nicely, and it's really cool that those levers are very easy to use, super quick to set up, and they all come with quick release plate. So literally, I want to take off this plate, I lose the lever, go over here, press the quick release plate, boom. All the levers are off, and you can mount a different camera with Arca Swiss compatible plate over here. So really convenient, really great design, kudos to Zhiyun, okay? And so with that said, everything is so easy to adjust. The adjusting motion is actually much smoother than the Ronin S. On the Ronin S, I oftentimes have to actually hold the camera a little bit and play around with the adjustment, because once the camera is on here, it's too heavy, nothing moves that easily. With this, with all the axes locked, it's super, super easy. Just take my words. If you're fed up with your old gimbal taking forever to balance, Weebill S is your best friend, okay? It's just so easy to balance. So I'm gonna lock it and show you guys. The bottom is a nice, mostly plastic, like tripod stand. So the stand also comes with some sort of a quick release thing on the top. This little button in the front is actually for when you are actually using it on the low hang briefcase mode. So if you have it in briefcase mode, the gimbal might come loose. Like if you do this, it might come loose. So this little button is actually used to lock it in here. So once it's locked, it doesn't really move around much. And if you unlock it, you can turn it off and leave the gimbal off. So that's more like a safety feature, okay? So it actually catches it over here and it doesn't really rotate around. So when you're doing the low hang mode like this, which by the way is a really nice and cool feature to have. Again, kudos to Zhiyun for having that. For the Ronin S, you just gotta do this and super heavy, okay? And on this, you go like this and boom, you go like that. Super, super cool. Really nice design, okay? End of this video, I'm gonna do some footages using some of the features of the Weebill S, but at this moment, we're almost at the original state where the plate is coming from. So I'm gonna, again, you gotta release this and then you can turn it when it's on the top over here. And if you put it on the bottom, there's really no pin for you to actually pushing, so you just leave it like that, okay? There you have it. So next is actually I'm gonna show you when this gimbal can be locked in another position for storage, which is if you go over here and you lock this axis, boom, it locks like over here, okay? So it locks into two positions. One is here and one is here, okay? That's for storage. And I'll show you. One position is here and one position is here. Now you can see how small and compact this gimbal really is, okay? So I just have all the axes locked. They all sit really nicely on the top, okay? And of course, if you move the bottom tripod stand, this is how small, amazingly small, the Weebill S is. It's just godsend for travel, you know, if you need to travel around with a very compact and powerful gimbal. And this is how small it is. And if I put it on the ground, oh, it folds flat like that, okay? Just for fun comparison, okay, I'm gonna leave it like that. And so I can make it into a few different parts. I'll show you. And this is the Ronin S. Obviously, I haven't secured it. And this is the battery. And this is the stand. So let's compare how compact can those be stored. Obviously, if you have a fairly limited amount of space in your backpack, this is gonna fit pretty much everywhere in your camera backpack. And this, not so much, and it's gonna dangle around. And by the way, this is 2 pounds more heavier than the Weebill S. I actually used the balance to measure both cameras when they all had a camera mounted, the exact same camera. So on the Zhiyun Weebill S with the A7 III with the 24 to 70 millimeter lens. It's 8 pounds, 8.8 pounds and 5 ounce. With the Ronin S, exact same setup, of course, also with the external monitor on both of those. It's 10 pounds, 4 ounce. Okay, so almost 2 pounds difference. And so this thing, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's built like a tank and actually supports more weight than what the Ronin, than the Zhiyun Weebill S can support, but it's just a mess and you cannot lock it, okay? You just cannot. So again, I'm gonna put this aside. It just moves around like crazy. Okay, all right, now we go back to this. Almost at the initial state when I first bought it, okay? So you can lay it flat like that, okay? I just love it. It's like so compact. Same with their Crane M2 that I reviewed, which I'm using to record this video. It's there's really not much to say about the compactness and the feature set of the Zhiyun Weebill S. It's gonna do all the jobs that the Ronin S can do if you don't have a much heavier camera, okay? So all the jobs Ronin S can do, this one can do as well. So with the thing back to its normal out-of-the-box state, let's talk about some limitations of the Weebill S. That is, again, they advertise that it can support Sony A7 III with a 24 to 70 2.8 G master lens, but they didn't mention the limitations of the support of this particular setup, which the Ronin S actually just does beautifully, and it still have more room for more heavier lens, okay? So for you to actually use the A7 III with the 24-70, you cannot mount any additional accessories. You can't even put an extra filter on the front, otherwise it's not able to balance on the Weebill S. It just falls to the front for the initial balance, okay? So if you put a lens hood on top, it's not gonna balance, it's gonna fall to the front. I balanced it at 24 millimeter, which is with the lens fully recessed, and you most definitely cannot balance when it's at 70 millimeter, or even like 35, the lens drops to the front. So, and that's with the included quick release plate mounted, pushing the camera all the way on the back to try to get to the center of the gravity. It just doesn't. It still just have the tendency to fall front. So it's interesting when they said that yes, it supports 24 to 70 G master with A7 III, but they didn't say it's with some slight limitation. Granted, if you power up the motor, even if it's not balanced, it's still gonna try to put it back into balance, but that actually puts a lot of strain on the motor, and it's gonna burn the battery much faster that way. Especially if you imagine if you zoomed in with a filter in the front with a lens hood, it's just gonna be so much stress on the motor. I am gonna test this setup actually in the next section of the video. Sorry this video is so long, but I want to do a more comprehensive test, especially for a $430 gimbal that I'm gonna be spending a lot of time on. And so I will definitely let you guys know at the conclusion of this video whether that works or not. I think it's gonna work. It's just that limitation of the weight that you can actually put on the gimbal. So the only other way of offsetting that limitation is putting counterweight somewhere on the camera or somewhere on the bottom plate of the camera, okay? So maybe some extra weight on the back down low. It might be able to bring the gimbal back to the center of the gravity, but that actually defies the purpose of having a small compact gimbal. With that said, I am getting a few more fast prime lens, and that should solve the limitation with using the zoom lens. Actually, the zoom lens on the video on the gimbal is actually not that much useful, because every time I change the zoom, like, you know, I have to rebalance the gimbal, which is already a hassle. And I rarely actually use the zoom feature. So I think a lighter prime lens is gonna work just fantastic on the Weebill S. So for example, I use my 55mm Zeiss f1.8 a lot, and that lens had no trouble on the Ronin S, and I doubt it's gonna have any trouble on this, on the Weebill S, and it's gonna be so much lighter, 2 pounds lighter to be exact, okay? So that is a huge difference in terms of weight, and in terms of convenience, in terms of ease of packing for photo shoots and everything in between, okay? So that is one limitation. That is the one limitation I want to talk about. So onto the next limitation, or not limitation, but onto the next thing that I kind of wish the Zhiyun would have improved upon, which is their built-in app. So the app provides some very basic setup in the app settings, and unfortunately with Sony camera, there's really the app is pretty much useless with the Sony camera, because you have to connect a lot of cables, you have to do a lot of setup for the camera to kind of work with the app. But on the Ronin S, the app design is much more thoughtful, but I assume, you know, DJI had more years of research and engineering experience compared to Zhiyun, which is a newcomer. And even though DJI is #1, Zhiyun is like #2, at least from the Chinese market, where both of those manufacturers are coming from. So they definitely have to do some catch up on the app design and the app support. But other than that, again, I personally don't use app that much, but from fiddling around between DJI's app and the Zhiyun's app, the DJI app is just one step above Zhiyun, okay, in that regard. So that is another part that I want to say that Zhiyun needs improvement on. One last thing of praising, which is I think it's very thoughtful for them to actually put all the access adjustments and the speed of the motion directly into a very nicely set up manual in here on the gimbal itself. So I don't necessarily have to fiddle with the Zhiyun app in the phone. I can just adjust all the parameters on the fly. If I think my panning speed is too fast, I can just quickly go to the manual mode, which is basically just pressing down on this little 4-way joystick. It goes into the manual mode, and then you can use the rotating wheel to adjust the all different kinds of settings, and the left and right to go in and out of the manual settings. I don't want to go into the detail because it's really intuitive manual setup. So I just want to let you guys know that it's very thoughtful of Zhiyun to actually put all those parameters in the gimbal itself. Now, it would be really nice if they could improve their app and also have the same feature in their app, because I know for sure some people is gonna prefer a more graphic interface when they are doing all those adjustments. At least I find the DJI Ronin S, the parameter setup is very intuitive and very easy to understand. So I was able to quickly adjust all the parameters to my liking on the Ronin S. But it's nice that Weebill S also integrated, again, all the parameter adjustments directly into the gimbal, which is amazing, which I think DJI should also do, okay? That is pretty much all the things I want to talk to you guys about. Very last thing is the battery. Again, I think I mentioned at the very beginning that the battery, you have to take it out to charge, which to me, at first I thought it's nice to use the interchangeable batteries, but now I think it's a hassle, because with my sweaty hands, it's really hard to open the battery door, okay? Like really hard. I have to use some sort of thing to like just pushing down really hard on here to open the battery door. I wish they would have used, I wish they would have integrated the charging capability directly into the gimbal itself. But then I think it might have added additional weight because they have to integrate the charging circuitry into the gimbal. Okay, so that's one last thing, a little thing to complain about. I wish they enabled charging on the gimbal itself. Okay. So with all those said, next section, we're gonna do a little test with the gimbal out in the field, which I think is gonna be the most important part actually, to test out to see if it's actually up to the test and all those functions are useful or not. So see you in the next section. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to end this review without any usable footage for the Zhiyun Weebill S. The reason being, I think the sample I have received is actually defective. So after all the unboxing and looking over the hardware features of the gimbal and praising about all the innovative designs, I started testing it out by actually mounting a camera and power down and doing some basic movements. And that's when I find out the gimbal actually every minute or so like does a very weird like vibration. It's like it just vibrates and it's really loud. And even my wife, like somewhere further away, can even hear the sound, and she was like, what's wrong with your gimbal? That's when I realized the gimbal I got is probably defective. So it's really unfortunate because design-wise, I think Zhiyun has did a wonderful job making or trying to make this gimbal as useful as possible. However, on the execution part of the equation, it has failed because when it gets delivered to my hand, it has failed to perform. Okay, so some other things that I've noticed is when I'm doing this kind of, you know, roll axis movements, sometimes it would like jump out of the, sometimes it just do some like really, like, did you see that? Sometimes it do some really weird movements like when I'm just moving around. It never happens on my Ronin S, and it just happens on this gimbal. Like, did you see that? Like, it just it does some weird movements on its own. So I think it almost got a mind of its own. That's why I think this gimbal is actually defective. So unfortunately, I'm gonna return the gimbal back to Amazon and get a refund. And I don't think I'm gonna have a exchange unit. I think I most definitely love the Zhiyun Crane M2, so, and it has been working wonderfully. So I'm gonna keep the Zhiyun Crane M2. And I'm still gonna just be using my very trustworthy, however, dangling around without access lock, the Ronin S, because it hasn't given me any problems yet, and it does exactly what I want it to do, which is stabilizing the footage, give me very smooth movements, and it has been doing an excellent job. So I think until next year, Zhiyun comes up with a maybe Weebill S improvement, Weebill S2 maybe. I would love to give it another try, and hopefully that sample, when I buy it, it should be working fully, okay? Instead of having a very innovative design, however, failed on the execution, okay? So with that being said, that should wrap up this review of the Weebill S. Whatever I said in the previous section of the review still applies, because the design it's really just very different, and it's just very, very easy to set up and use, especially on the field. If your time is very constrained on a video shoot and you need to balance your gimbal really quickly, the Weebill S, on the hardware part at least, it's gonna work much, much faster than the Ronin S. And so with that being said, my unit is defective, and hopefully my next unit would be working. Okay, thank you so much for watching at this review. If you guys have any questions about the Weebill S, or if you have questions about even the Crane M2 that I have and love, and the Ronin S for that matter, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below, and I'd be happy to answer those questions for you guys. Okay, so thank you so much again for watching at this video. I'll see you in my next one. Ciao. 就按这个。
我还没按对地方。
It's fine.
Sorry，马上好了。
No worries.